Welcome to Something Positive for Positive People. I'm Courtney Brain. Something Positive for Positive People is a podcast featuring the experiences of people living with or affected by sexually transmitted infections. This episode is going to sound a little bit different than the other ones up until now, just because historically we've introduced guests by their ethnicity, sexual preference, relationship status, geographical location, career field, and after a little bit of time and reflection, I realized that that may not be in line with the ultimate goal for what I want to accomplish here. What we're going to do now is just introduce people based on who they are. We have Laura Aiisha with us. She is the Ignite Intimacy podcast host. Laura, how are you?
Hey, bup.
Is that your tagline?
No, I'm
Oh,
just saying, what's up? Something positive for positive people. Yes,
I'm
I love that
so
title.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to have you here with me, especially for us to have been able to do this so soon and on such short notice.
Yeah, it's awesome, and really grateful that we had a chance to record a conversation for Ignite Intimacy just a couple of days ago.
Me too. I felt like it was really good practice because I talk to other people about this stuff all the time and I'm usually asking questions. So whenever anyone asks me questions, it feels so good to be able to not have the burden of coming up with the right questions and making sure to stay on topic. On your podcast, that was your responsibility.
Exactly. Well, and I like to just go with the flow of the conversation and follow the energy, so I keep it really free form anyways, and we just have fun with it. I'm looking forward to doing that with you today.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And I hope I can match the energy of it.
Oh, I think no doubt you've got great energy, and that was what was so great about recording with you is that your energy comes through so beautifully, and especially with what we're talking about here. These are sensitive subjects, and it's not for the faint of heart. You have to be courageous to come out and talk about this stuff publicly, and then that creates space for others to do the same thing, which is what we're doing here, right? It's
Exactly.
like
Exactly.
leveling the playing field.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I do want to ask you, of course, is what is your condition?
Okay, so I have herpes 1 and 2.
Genitally or orally?
Both. So it's been, gosh, I think I got type 1 on my lips when I was maybe 15, and I had a boyfriend who got cold sores all the time, and I had no idea that they were contagious.
Yeah.
And so we would make out when he had cold sores, and voila.
How did you feel after contracting it that way, especially knowing where it came from and just understanding that you didn't know what you were getting yourself into?
I had no issue with it whatsoever. Of course, I don't enjoy getting cold sores on my lips. Thankfully, it only happens once in a while. I'm actually healing from one right now. It usually comes from stress or when my immune system is down and I'm under the weather. So it's interesting how different the experience has been with herpes 1 on my lips and then type 2 in my genital region. Just how different that whole experience has been, even though it's the same virus.
Right.
It's just in different parts of my body. I was really risky as a teenager, so when I was 16 and I got into a bunch of trouble and ended up being court ordered to a couple of different rehabs, and I had to go through getting tested and all of that, I remember being terrified. I was convinced that I could have HIV back then. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. I tested negative for that and for all other things, but I did also have HPV as well. That's cleared up over the years. That was a pretty tense time. I remember being terrified when I got that first HIV test.
You said you got cold sores, so HSV type 1 on the lips at age 15. Did that really affect you
No, not at all.
as far as dating went when you were involved with other partners going forward? How did they respond to you getting cold sores?
Not at all. It wasn't a weird thing. I would just say if I was dating someone or engaging with someone on a more intimate or sexual level, I would just say, oh, I have a cold sore on my lips. So, like, really, it's your call if you want to make out or whatever.
Did you ever have to explain it as herpes?
Not until later years, not until more recent years.
And what's happened recently for you to have to begin explaining that cold sores were herpes?
Just that I realized that they were.
Oh.
Like, just that I realized, like, oh, that's a type of herpes virus. And I realized just how contagious it was. Also, that, you want to keep your mouth away from anybody's genitals when you have a cold sore on your lips, because you can transfer HSV1 to someone's genitals.
How far apart was your coming into contact with genital HSV2 after having been exposed to type 1?
I think I was 29.
Oh, okay. So you had a good chunk of time. So how was the diagnosis of genital HSV2 different than finding out you got cold sores?
Oh, it was totally devastating. I had my first outbreak when I was in Hawaii for the first time for my twin sister's wedding. Yeah, and I was so excited to be there. I was also in a very destructive sort of relationship with someone that I had fallen in love with, which it was more of like a dependency type of thing. I've only had a handful of longer term relationships in my life, and he was one of them. He and someone else that I had a longer term relationship with, neither one of them would get tested. I kept asking if he was seeing anyone else. He was a touring musician, so he was all over the world, and just wanted to make sure that I was safe engaging with him sexually. And that now is like a big warning sign. When a person either refuses to get a test or says, oh, they're like flippant about it. Oh, sometime in the last year,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, well, have you had any unprotected sex? When I start asking them questions about it and they get weird about it, that's a big red flag for me. So anyways, yeah, I was on vacation in Hawaii for my twin sister's wedding, and she was like, please don't bring any baggage around this guy on this trip. I just really want you present for my wedding, which was a very fair thing to ask. And then I got my first outbreak, which totally consumed me. I had no idea what it was. I was totally freaked out. As soon as I returned to New York City, literally off the plane, I went to an STD clinic and they diagnosed it. And I thought my life was over. I was like, this is so devastating. I am so heartbroken over this, and just I felt destroyed by it, and I felt just so shameful. And at that point in my life, I was still being really, like, people still say I'm hard on myself, but I was being really, really hard on myself. And the internal dialogue was like, God damn it, Laura, here you go again. You know better. What is wrong with you? So yeah, I really retreated and actually was very guarded for a long time. It also gave me the opportunity to take a step back, because I remember within a few years before that diagnosis, my dear, dear friend Moon Johnson, who has since passed, he said, Laura, if you want the loving partnership that you say that you want with a man in your life, you've got to stop having different lovers and different boyfriends and just get focused. I took his words to heart. And because of the diagnosis, it caused me to become very picky and to increase my self-care, especially around sex and intimacy, 100-fold, and get very confident and more strict is the word that's coming up. Which is, yeah, no, not going to do that thing.
Maybe discipline.
Discipline.
There you
Thank
go.
you. That's a way better word than
Yeah,
strict.
strict just sounds so bad. Like
I
you're
know.
forced to
Like,
do
oh,
something you
like
don't
I
want to
could see
do.
the nuns, like with the little whip. So yeah, that was the beginning of that experience for me. And then actually some really powerful things have come from that diagnosis.
Who did you first tell?
Well, probably my sister, because she was really aware of what I was going through when I was in Hawaii with her. And then certainly a handful of my closest friends. And then I waited to tell this person until they were back in town and I could actually tell them face to face.
And when you told that person, what was their response?
Very quiet, very sort of like, I'm so sorry. I have never had any issues that I know of. And this person had also not been tested in God knows how long.
Mm-hmm.
So, they claimed that they hadn't been sleeping around, which I found out within a year after that was not true. So I was one of several person was sleeping with, and whether or not it was protected or unprotected, it still was that I was asking for some transparency. He wasn't willing to give it to me. And then also as a result of him not taking care of his sexual health and getting tested, and not even that they test for herpes regularly, you actually have to request a test for herpes. And I've heard that some clinics are just like, oh no, we don't even test for that. Because it's so common. I don't know why a clinic wouldn't offer a test for that if it's an STD clinic, but anyways, so they were very sorry about it in their behavior, and they still didn't go and get a test.
Oh my goodness. How did you feel about that? They really didn't care to go and get tested.
I was angry about it because there's this thing that goes around with certain people, like, oh, well, you got tested, so I actually know that I'm good, or that I may have this and whatever, and so it's like...
Yep. Guilty. I've done that.
You've done that?
Yes, I'm guilty of it. Whenever I was between partners and they would get tested or have their annual wellness exams, if they came back and were like, oh yeah, got all my tests done, I'm clear, I'd just be like, yes, me too, and leave it at that.
Oh,
yep.
Courtney.
Well, no, that's old me. That's before I got herpes.
Courtney.
Now that I got herpes, I get tested regularly.
Yeah, and I would venture to say there are quite a few people out there who believe that if their partner gets tested, that means they're good.
Mm-hmm. And it is a common thing, yeah, especially among men, just because we don't have to go to the doctor. We don't have annual exams like women do. If it's not necessary, then there's no need for us to go. Now, if we're sick and like absolutely have to go to the doctor for whatever reason, more than likely we'll just be there for whatever that reason is and then go on about our business. But there's no real incentive for us to go and get tested, or there's nothing forced upon us that says we have to get tested. Whereas with women, there are things that can go unnoticed and you would be more aware of or concerned about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you're recording in your closet right
now. You see my fashion going on back here?
Oh, yeah.
Or lack thereof. All my
we might be calling Queer Eye for the straight guy on you.
We got t-shirts, sweatpants, and basketball shorts. Seriously, getting tested is a big deal, and it should be made a bigger deal. I recently went to the Pride activities here in St. Louis. One thing that I noticed in hindsight after I left, I was like, whoa, this is a group of people that I was raised in my household, grandparents, great-grandparents. Being gay was bad. This is probably the worst thing you can do. And there was a whole stigma behind it. If you're gay, you're going to get HIV, those kinds of things. So after having become an adult, going off to college and becoming cultured and surrounded by various people, I had the confidence to go to a pride parade as a cisgendered straight male. I hope I'm saying this right. I'll get an email if I'm saying it wrong. But
I think you got it.
As a straight dude going to a pride parade or pride event, let's call it that, because I thought I was at the parade and I showed up late, but turns out I was just at a function. There were a handful of food trucks. There was a small stage with performers. People were outside dancing, and there were a few tents set up. So I'm out here supporting a friend and guest that we had on the podcast and her nonprofit. When I'm walking around, I see that all of these different people who identify as something different, whether it be lesbian, gay, bisexual. I'm trying to go through the whole rainbow here, but each part of the rainbow recognize the bigger picture of the rainbow. So everyone who's here is not just part of the community, but you have loved ones of the community. You've got two women co-parents, one's clearly Caucasian, one's clearly of another ethnicity, and they're changing the diaper of this little black girl, and she gets up, runs around, plays, and they pick her up, kiss her. There's so much love there. Different people interacting with different people, everyone's singing, everyone's dancing, people are dressed however they're dressed, and really just self-expressing. And when I left there, it was on my mind that, damn, this is a stigmatized group of people who are living with that stigma, I guess. And the biggest thing that I noticed is how people with herpes deal with the stigma versus how people in the LGBTQ community have dealt with it. There's a whole party around it, and there's HIV testing. So to someone like
Yeah.
me who grew up thinking or learning, being taught that if you're gay, you're going to get HIV, being there and seeing, oh, okay, there's all these stations for HIV. So that tackles that because this group of people is aware of what the stigma is, and they're doing something about it by encouraging people to know what their status is, encouraging
Yeah.
people to get tested. And
Yes.
then bringing that into the herpes community is like, well, why can't we have a similar thing to be able to encourage people to get tested or encourage the support of one another, and then get that support from our family members, friends, and allow it to branch out from there, allowing it to
Yes.
start
Yes.
within the community.
Yeah, well, and we're making some blanket statements, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the grand spectrum. There are people who are in the closet, terrified for their lives to come out. And then there are people who have come out. There are people who just courageously are out in the world, even though they know that their lives are at risk by being out. And I have such a deep level of respect and honor for our LGBTQ family to be out, especially in certain countries and certain cities and certain towns. Your life is on the line every day, right? And to be out in that way and to be so courageous, it blows my mind. And what I found with my journey with a positive HSV2 diagnosis 14 years ago is that I've gone through the grand spectrum of experience around this diagnosis and around living with it. And from totally devastated, my life is over, what is my sex life going to look like? How am I going to tell people about this? Dealing with potential rejection, just all of that. And then slowly moving into spaces of more confidence, sharing with more people. Like I started to just kind of dip my toe in the water and share with some of my girlfriends, and then having them say, oh yeah, I've got that too. I deal with that. And then I was like, oh, I'm not the only one. I felt like I was the only one in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was such an isolating feeling.
Yeah, it's scary.
So when I actually started to share it with people in my community and people that I love, and then do the dance and figure out sharing with potential partners, that was a challenge. And it was a challenge for many, many years. And then it became easier. My self-love grew. My self-confidence grew. And I had people straight up reject me. I mean, just straight up like, no, I can't hang. And then I had someone that I was seeing for a while. I mean, basically his response was, okay, yeah, I had a girlfriend who had that, and we were just really careful, and I'm still going to eat your pussy. And I was like,
best response ever.
Come on.
Yeah. I gotta say that might be top 2 best responses to get back. First one being me too, and then that one. Having both HSVs really hasn't impacted your dating life except for, the potential rejections here and there, right?
It's definitely impacted my dating life, and it has impacted it in ways where I felt rejected and bummed out and angry. It also has impacted it in ways where I felt powerful and acknowledged. And, I've gotten quite a few times, because I get that most people are not sharing their status. Get that from people in my experience, that people say, wow, thank you for being courageous enough to share that with me. And I'll ask, have you had anyone else share this with you? And it's very few and far between that people say, yeah, I have. And people are sharing, and I would venture to say there are quite a few people living with some sort of an STI that don't share it. And everyone has their own approach to it. I know someone who said, I started to ask men, would you want to know or would you not want to know? And a lot of men in her experience said, no, I wouldn't want to know, because it changes my relationship to your body. And I have an issue with that, because I am on the journey to love myself fully and wholly. and to know myself as whole, complete, and perfect as I am right now. And I am creating space for people in my life to know me fully and wholly, all of it, the grand spectrum of who I be, who I present myself as in this lifetime, with all of it, and to still be here and to still love me and be on the journey with me. And if you don't know that about me, then it's a big part of me that you don't know.
That was deep. I like it
Hey,
though. I
I don't
love
know
it.
how to do it any other way, honey.
You came out on your podcast as being HSV positive. Which episode was that?
Episode 16. It's our second most popular podcast episode. If that doesn't tell you something,
Yeah.
People out there want to know. I'm speaking to everyone who's listening to the podcast and anyone who has recently been diagnosed or is afraid to go get a test. Listen, it is a powerful path to be responsible and take care of yourself and be that space for other people as well. I am living proof that you can go from feeling like it's over, total devastation, so much shame, so much regret, and just yucky feelings, and just feeling like, okay, well, maybe I'm never going to have another boyfriend again, to being completely empowered in who I am today and the ability to share my status with partners in a way that is just from nothing. It's just, okay, this is where I'm at, this is what I have, and it's my responsibility to share that with you. So do you have any questions? Would you like to, talk about it further? And then creating space for them anytime there's something that comes up for them around it, or they feel triggered about it, or need to talk, let's talk about it. I want to just make sure there's nothing ever in the space about that.
What gave you the courage to come out on your podcast about it?
I got connected to Adrial from the H Opportunity, and definitely check that out. He's amazing, and he's got a whole blog and resources. I think it's hopportunity.com. And I said, I need to record an interview with you for my podcast. He was totally game. And then I said, I had been thinking about it for a while, and I said, I want to come out about this because I'm part of the movement to destigmatize herpes and living with herpes, and to just level the playing field and have it be as normal of a conversation of like, do you prefer blowjobs or hand jobs? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just have it be like just normalized, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so episode 16 of Ignite Intimacy podcast, check it out. Again, it's the second most listened to episode so far on the podcast.
Yeah. And what is Ignite Intimacy about? Let's talk about that. Well, I'll tell you from my personal experience, was the episode titled "The Clitoris is Not a DJ Booth."
Oh, yeah.
That was the one I listened to, and I took something from that. I'll leave that to the listener to go and check it out. But there was something that I did from that, and it worked. I don't know the best way to say it, but applying what was taught from that episode did something, and it did a good thing.
Yeah, for you and your partner?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Great.
We enjoyed that thing we did.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love that. That's juicy. So the whole reason why I started the podcast is that I've been on my own relational journey with romance and sex and intimacy for many, many years. And I wanted to know, why have I been mostly single in my adult life? And psychologically, I could list off 10 reasons why. And then I see people in one long-term relationship after another, or people who meet in high school and they're married for 70 years, and then they pass. And then, there's just so many different relationship styles, and as sexually expressed as I always felt like I have been, I realized there is so much I haven't experienced and things that I still felt embarrassed or shameful to talk about. And I wanted to go on this journey of exploration and give other people the opportunity to join me. So that's why I started Ignite Intimacy and launched the podcast in August of 2016.
Nice. And how
Yeah,
many episodes are we at? Are we at 80?
77.
Oh, 77. I remember we
Yeah,
were in the...
my lucky birth year,
Oh,
77.
nice.
And yeah, and so we cover so many different topics on the podcast, all relating in some way, shape, or form to sex, intimacy, romantic relationships.
Hmm.
Lots of talk about communication, the female anatomy, orgasm, different relational styles, open relationships, polyamory, monogamy, BDSM. The list goes on and on and on. A ton about consent, making disclosure sexy, which is what we're, talking about right now. And that loops around again to communication. Just how can you communicate about sensitive topics without it being so heavy and significant, and just creating some spaciousness around it, some juice and some flow, so that again you create a different energy around those conversations.
Hmm. And I think that that's important because preventive measures aren't necessarily working anymore. It's more
Yeah.
so about preparation. There's no safe sex. There is no surefire way to prevent yourself from contracting an STI if you are sexually active.
Yeah, like you don't have sex.
And then even then, like, you could be exposed to herpes and pass it on to your genital region somehow. Even if that's not even 100%.
Yeah.
So one of the things that what I'm trying to do here with Something Positive for Positive People is give people direction for after a diagnosis, or prepare people for what happens in the event that you do become exposed to a STI. I'm so glad that we were able to get connected, because I feel like being able to openly have conversations about sex is crucial. It's one of the major contributors to safer sex. When you can openly and honestly communicate the topic of consent, even when you're able to talk about these kinds of things, it reduces the risk of contracting an STI, passing an STI, because we're comfortable with having these kinds of conversations.
That's right.
I appreciate you for sharing your status, coming out about it, for being on this podcast, for the podcast you're doing, and for sharing the journey that you're on with Ignite Intimacy as well. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, thank you, man. And I just want to say that I was nervous to have this conversation today. So I present as courageous and powerful, and I am nervous, just like everyone else out there, nervous and scared, and oh God, what if so-and-so sees this, or, I start dating someone who I haven't told yet because we haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
and they see this and they're like, ooh, no, I'm staying away from that, because that's the story that I have in my head.
Yeah.
And I choose to show up anyways, and show up in the face of those fears, and be part of the movement, like I said, that is normalizing this conversation, and encouraging more people to actually have the conversation.
Yeah. The beauty about being out, though, publicly about it, is that when people reach out to you, or they find you or Google you, you should Google everyone you take out on a date, first of all. You'd be surprised what comes up. I even Googled myself, and the first thing that pops up is personal trainer talks about his STD, and I was like, oh shit. I'd hate if I was actively dating, Yeah, Google people. You'll get a lot from that. But what I was saying is just that the beauty about being out about it is you assume everybody knows. And when you can go through life under the assumption that everyone knows your deepest, darkest secret, it gives you a whole new sense of perspective, because it's like, all right, now what do you have on me? My favorite movie is 8 Mile for that reason. The rap battle, Eminem just trashes himself, and his opponent has nothing to say, and he wins. So that's essentially how life is, when you're able to just own who you are, be who you are, life's just so much more simple to live.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when we're not hiding, when there's nothing to hide.
It's not. We're at a point now where everyone who's listening to this is more than likely sexually active, unless this makes its way into the education system. And we're teaching about sexual health through this podcast, which would be mind-blowing to me, considering the amount of times the F-bomb's been used. But whatever we can do to help, we're here. So, Laura, how can people find you?
So people can find me. Ignite Intimacy is on all the podcast platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and elsewhere. Just search Ignite Intimacy Podcast on Google, your favorite ever-present free assistant, and you can check us out on social media at Ignite Intimacy on both Facebook and Instagram, also igniteintimacy.com. And if you'd like to contact me directly, hello@igniteintimacy.com.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to leave us with or that you wanted to add that we didn't get to touch on?
I just want to say that I'm so grateful for you, Courtney, and the stand that you're taking for people living with positive STI results, and for the energy that you're creating around this conversation, and for the support and the space that you be for people who may be really in the dark place right now, struggling with a positive diagnosis or not sure whether they're living with something or not and afraid to get tested or whatever the case may be. I just so honor you, and everyone who's listening, I just want to say, get up right now, get out of your way. The world is calling you to be your greatest legacy. So yeah, get up, get out of your way, stand strong and courageous, and love yourselves and love each other. And I'm in the work right now. I'm on the court playing that game, and it's a journey. It's a wild and wonderful journey here in life. So grateful to be on Something Positive for Positive People. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. What do you do outside of the podcast?
So I'm a business consultant. I also am a singer and writer.
There it is. I never even asked you that. Oh my God. So I opened a podcast with, we're going to ask people what they do rather than what they look like. And then I go the whole time without ever asking you that.
Yeah. So yeah, you can check out my music at lauraaiisha.bandcamp.com, and it's Laura A. So LauraAIISHA.bandcamp.com. And my music is on iTunes and all of that via Laura Aiisha, AIISHA.
You have a lot of vowels in your name. Lots of I's.
Just to keep it interesting.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, man. Yeah, we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely.
Okay. Ciao for now.
Bye.
Peace.
That concludes this episode of Something Positive for Positive People featuring Laura Aiisha of the Ignite Intimacy podcast. Please, please, please like, rate, review, subscribe to Something Positive for Positive People, and check out Ignite Intimacy whenever you get a chance. Both of us are on each other's podcast, which is pretty cool. So on her podcast, you get my story, and then on this one, you've gotten hers. Please continue to help this podcast grow by leaving those reviews, letting people know that it exists. I thank each and every one of you for your support and the ongoing feedback that I'm getting privately from new listeners who find the podcast useful. Thank you again to all the guests that we've had on for bravely sharing your stories and for rolling with me on this roller coaster, because the podcast, as I always mention, is evolving into something, and we're figuring out what that is kind of as we go along. Till next time, stay positive.
Yes.